Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. People of Reddit who work the day shift at non-haunted businesses and don't spend all of your time in the woods, what's the creepiest thing you've ever experienced? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was walking down the street when I saw a rusty nail in the road. I picked it up and threw it into an empty house's yard. Not helpful, I know. After I threw the nail, a man came out of what I thought was an empty house and shouted to me. I freaked out, thinking it was about the nail, and kept walking towards my house. The guy didn't sound mad, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. He started following me to the street and gesturing me to come over, but my gut told me to keep on walking. I get home and see from my house the empty house is now surrounded by cops. At this point, I still think it's about the nail. After a while, it gets worse and men in full gear show up. I found out later that the house was indeed empty. The men inside were known criminals and I very much almost ended up a hostage. Dodged the F out of that bullet. The summer after I graduated from high school, I left work early and went up to my parents' cabin in northern Michigan. Spent that night at the beach watching the sunset. Once the sun went down and it became nearly pitch black, no light pollution, I got to my car and started driving down the highway, M22. After about 10 seconds of being at speed, there was an older Tahoe, late 90s, that started riding my ass and flashing its high beams, so I got up to about 60 in a 45. They were still on my ass. I pulled off to the side road that my parents' cabin is off of, and they took the same turn. I thought this seemed weird because there's only about 30 or 40 houses on the road, so I went all the way to the end, which is usually a dead end but leads to a maintenance area for the golf course nearby. The truck was still following me. At this point, I was freaking out because if I pulled into the house, they'd know where we'd live, and they were still following close by. I took a ton of random turns, and the truck kept following every single turn for about 15 minutes. I finally had a chance to make a turn with traffic going through the intersection that gave me a few seconds head start. Pulled down a side street, went up 100 yards, turned off all my lights and waited. Truck slowly drove by the perpendicular street and kept going. Booked it home, pulled my car around the side away from the main road, and pulled every curtain. For an 18-year-old, I was scared as hell that night. Our old house was on a corner, and in lieu of a backyard, had a side yard with a small deck that wrapped around the back. The dining room had patio doors that led out to the back, and we would have barbecues and such back there. When I was 14, we only had one desktop computer and one laptop for the family. My brother and I would fight over the desktop. That's where Diablo 2 was installed, so I would use the laptop to write music. On one particular night, my brother had a friend over, and they were downstairs doing whatever, and I was at the dining room table on the laptop. As I was wrapped up in my writing, I didn't pay much attention to my surroundings. I heard a knock on the patio door, which startled me. I looked up, expecting my brother or his friend. The basement had a door that leads to the back deck as well. Standing at the door and waving was a person, could not tell sex or age, wearing a Halloween pig mask. Thinking it was my brother or his friend, I mouthed, "Good one," and gave the person the finger, and they walked away. As soon as they left, I went downstairs to give them shit, and to my surprise and dismay, they were both sitting on the couch playing PlayStation. They swore up and down it wasn't either of them, and there was no way one of them could have had time to get downstairs and unmask before getting on the couch. To this day, I have no idea who it was that knocked and waved. It was me. I was wearing the pig mask and came to your house and stood there. I was going to give you candy, but then you gave me the finger. It wasn't me. Probably a ghost. My 3-year-old, who is normally very happy-go-lucky, was extremely concerned the other day. He kept looking around the room, talking about the rhino. Who knows what a 3-year-old might translate as a rhino? This went on for about 20 minutes. He was very concerned and looking around the entire room. So we get to a point where he says the rhino is moving. My wife asks where the rhino is. He's coming to Daddy. Yeah, I'm Daddy, and my ass puckered just a wee bit at that moment. Fast forward about 4 days, last night, and he starts talking about the ghost. My daughter asks my son, "Where's the ghost?" My son says, "He's biting Daddy." What the actual F? 18 years old and first time ever operating a dozer with an open air cab and roll cage. Was clearing trees out of a waterway on a farm. All of a sudden I'm knocked out. Come to and blood is running down my face into my lap. Dozer pushing up against a tree, just spinning tracks. My neck and head hurt. I thought I'd been shot or something. No idea. Nobody around me. Wasn't told how to shut off the dozer, as it was an older 6C. You don't just turn the key off. Called my dad, and he runs over and pulls the idle bar all the way down and it shuts off. We both are clueless as to what happens. Then he sees a branch behind my head that I must have drove through and pushed it forward pretty far, and it snapped back into the cab and hit me in the forehead. Never saw it or anything. When I was 17 and worked in retail as a cashier, I had a very old couple come through my line buying a wok. The husband, who was at least 85, started making conversation with me about the wok and asked if I liked Chinese food. Yeah, I like Chinese. Do you want to go out with me to get some Chinese? He winks at me. No, sir. Oh, well. He looks a bit disappointed and turns to look at his wife, who's on the phone with someone. Would you at least like to come home with me and live in my basement? No. The rest of the transaction took place in terrified silence. His wife never said a word. I wonder to this day if he was trying to joke because he sounded so sincere, or if he was suffering from dementia, or something else that makes him not realize how creepy that sounds to someone young enough to be your great-grandchild. I'm a teacher of adult students, and one student of mine is kind of intense and creepy. Actually, she's based at another school, but specifically started attending classes at my school after meeting me. When I first started, she kept giving me welcome presents, as I was new to the country. Just simple things like food, postcards, and books, which was a nice idea, but it seemed a little excessive. She added me on social media, and then got upset when I didn't reply to her constant messages. I told her that I don't really use social media. Anyway, I didn't see her for a few months and figured she'd just gone back to her own school or stopped studying or whatever, and was relieved that she'd clearly got bored of me. But then last week, she comes in and gives me an envelope full of photos of me during lessons that she'd taken without me knowing. I was a little weirded out, to say the least. New Year's Day 1995. I was in the middle of third year university, and a bunch of friends had come to visit me and my roommate for the festivities. We were all pretty hungover from drinking the night before, and went out for the usual nice day out, a bit chilly, I don't feel so good, post-greasy breakfast hungover strolled around the neighborhood. Two of these friends were twin brothers. One of them we hung out with all the time. The other we'd just met for the first time. He was pretty normal the night before, joining in the fun, but on this day, we were all hanging around a local basketball court shooting hoops with an old basketball we'd found in the grass. And this twin brother kept following me around all over the place with the creepiest grin I'd ever seen in my life, staring right into the nether regions of my soul the whole time. I'd back away and join the group again, and he'd keep following me around. When we were walking back to the apartment, it was just me and him walking down the sidewalk behind the group, and he moved over in front of me, stared at me with a creepy look again, and fell down to his knees as if to worship me or something. I didn't know what to do. Hey buddy, you all right? We're heading back now, right? And so on. He wouldn't say anything. He'd just be there on his knees, looking up at me with a clenched face and squinted eyes, as if he were looking directly into the sun or something. Later that day, my roomie said he was tripping balls, so I thought nothing of it and moved on with my life. A few weeks later, we got a phone call from the twin brother we usually hung out with, and it turned out that this other twin brother went over to his aunt's place with a knife and stabbed her 14 times. She didn't die, but, still pretty bad. He had even called the police before going, because he knew he was going to do it, but he couldn't stop himself from doing it because, the voices and so on. The ensuing court case was widely covered in the media, as this was a relatively smaller community where this sort of thing doesn't happen on a regular basis. I was reading one of the articles, and one of the testimonies was that the twin brother was severely schizophrenic and was hearing voices in his head. He believed to his very bones that his aunt was the devil, and that he had been commanded by God to go and kill her. So, who was this God that told him to go kill her? Well, as the newspaper article described, it was a guy in a group he hung out with on New Year's Day. It didn't take me long to realize that he was talking about me. This was 22 years ago. I know for a fact it was mental illness, but just knowing that I had somehow commanded him to go kill his aunt stays with me to this day. I work in residential environments as a service technician. I go to houses and apartments and condos to do my thing. I was working in one particular condo building with over 70 floors and about 8 elevators. The elevators are in 2 groups of 4, with 2 giant elevator shafts. Just picture one giant square that is the lobby and 2 smaller rectangles in that room that are the elevator shafts. The 2 shafts are identical looking. This is relevant because it's easy to get disoriented as to which direction you're facing when you exit an elevator. Anyways, after doing a bit of work on the 65th floor unit, I realize I have to go to parking level 1 to a utility room. No big deal. I hop on the elevator and press P1 and take a lonely ride down 60 plus floors. I reach P1 level, and when the elevator doors open, I hear weeping. I'm immediately worried for whoever is crying, so I start to pinpoint where the noise is coming from. It's a child crying, and since all the walls in this area are bare and concrete, the sound is echoing and seems to be coming from everywhere. Panic didn't set in until I had searched 4 corners of the square room and hadn't found anyone. Now, I'm no mathematician, but I'm pretty sure 4 corners is all of them, so my mind starts racing. I decide to nope out and head back to the door that would eventually lead me to the utility room that I was supposed to be working in, which I had already passed earlier on my search. I round the corner, and there I found the source of the noise. It's a little girl with straight black hair, crouched down, sobbing into her knees facing the corner. I don't know why I didn't see her before, because I already checked that corner. So either I am mistaken, or she heard me get off the elevator and was actively moving away from me. For a moment I considered running because that shit looked like it was straight out of The Ring, but that moment of nonsense subsided and I asked her what's wrong. Turns out she was just lost and scared, so I escorted her back to the concierge desk so security could help her back to her room. Nothing really creepy after the fact, but for a moment I thought she would turn around with no face or something. If I'm in the parking garage of a 70-story building and I hear the sobbing of a little girl and don't find her and then she looks like the girl from The Ring, I'm out. So good for you. We had quite a large house, shaped like an L, but the L was cut into a hill, so the bottom part of the L had a downstairs which was almost underground. It had windows facing out, but a lot was either in the hill or under another floor. I had the room on the bottom part of the L from the 13 onwards. My room had 2 doors, one that opened out to a kind of rumpus room, and one to an ensuite. It was always creepy as F, but being a skeptic, I dared anything there to do something to me. Grew up fine, but I could never sleep unless both doors were shut. When my parents went away, I'd break the rules and bring my dogs in to sleep on the bed. I woke a few times late to see her alert and staring at the door to the rumpus room. Occasionally I'd hear a clawing at the screen on the window, but we had dogs, cats, horses, and the local bush turkeys, foxes, etc. I figured if something was there that shouldn't have been, my dogs would have gone ballistic. Fast forward 5 years, bring a new girlfriend to my home to meet my parents, slept in my old room. She woke up screaming between 12 and 3 a.m. twice out of 3 nights we stayed there. Have been with her 5 years since, and it's only happened in that room. She won't sleep in the house anymore. My parents let my younger sister move into the room about 4 years ago. She asked me recently if I ever heard scratching on the window late at night. Both of the dogs we had, plus the cat and the horses, are all dead. It being roughly 10 years later, so the scratching is likely independent of the pets, unless the local animals are effing with us. She also said she can't sleep unless both doors are shut, and she'll often put door stops under both doors so she hears if either door opens. She Googled some stuff and decided to sage the room and said she'd had hectic nightmares since and woke up screaming late at night a few times. For reference, she was about 14 when the night terrors happened with my girlfriend, so we never told her. As I said, I'm a skeptic, but it's still pretty creepy.